This is Blue Book Citation Module number 6, which covers Chapter 15, Electronic Internet and Non-Print Sources. B10 on page 25 and Rule 18 on page 164 tell you how to cite to non-print sources, including films, television broadcasts, videotapes, and audio recordings. If there is a traditional printed source that you can cite to, Blue Book Rule 18.2 requires that you cite to that instead of to a non-print source. But Rule 18.2 says that you can cite to a non-print version of the source if it is an authenticated, official, or an exact copy of the printed source. For example, the Westlaw and LexisNexis websites have a bunch of cases that are unpublished and were never put in print editions. You can cite to these non-print sources because they are exact copies of the original opinions. First, let's discuss how to cite to cases contained within electronic databases. Rule 18.3.1 on page 171 will help you with this. If the case you wish to cite to is not published in a reporter, then you should cite to a widely used electronic database, such as Westlaw or LexisNexis, that does contain that case. Your citation should include the following information in this order: the case name, the docket number, the database identifier and number of the case, if any, your pin site, the court name, and the full date of the court decision. Here's an example of how you would cite to an unpublished case on LexisNexis. Note how before the pin site there is an asterisk or little star. The short form includes only the party name, the database name and number, and the pin site. Here's what the same case from above would look like, only in short form. Rules for citing constitutions and statutes on electronic databases can be found under Rule 18.3.2 on page 171. A citation to a statute or constitutional provision that you find on an electronic database is identical to a citation to the printed code, except for the date parenthetical. For either printed or non-printed statutes, the date in the parenthetical is the date of publication, not the date that the statute was adopted. Electronic databases will tell you how current the statute is that you are reading with language such as current through the 2013 legislative session. You add such information in the date parenthetical after the commercial publisher's name and the name of the database. Here's an example of a citation to a statute on an electronic database. In the date parenthetical, West is the name of the commercial publisher, Westlaw is the name of the database, and through 2011 special session is the information provided by the database regarding how current this version of the statute is. Here's an example of the short form cite for the same statute found on the same electronic database. Next, the rules for citing to legislative, administrative, and executive materials on electronic databases can be found under Rule 18.3.3 on page 172. The citation for such materials from non-printed sources is identical to the citation for their counterparts in printed sources. The only difference is that the name of the database and any assigned numbers are added at the end of the citation. This example, for instance, the electronic database on which this federal report was found is Westlaw. The only information to show that this is a cite to an electronic database is 1971 WL 11312 at the end of the citation. Rules for citing to secondary sources found on an electronic database can be found under Rule 18.3.4 on page 172. You cite to such materials as you would normally, but at the end you just tack on a parallel cite to the database and identifier. For example, here's a citation to a book. Notice that everything before the italicized available at looks just like a regular old citation to a book in print. The parallel cite to the electronic source is just 1996 WL 4815-108. Now we'll cover citations to internet sources. Here, internet source means a website It would not include electronic databases like Westlaw or LexisNexis. You would use a parallel citation to an internet source when the source is available in printed form, but you would like to include internet information, like the URL, as an aid to your reader. Parallel citations to sites on the World Wide Web is governed by B10.1.2 on page 26 and Rule 18.2.3 on page 169. The Blue Book doesn't really care for websites on the internet, but it does permit you to cite to those sources when such a citation will materially increase accessibility to the reader. Just like with citations to secondary materials from electronic databases, the citation would be identical to a citation to a printed source, but with available at in italics and then the URL appended at the end. This rule applies to any source that's covered by Blue Book Rules 10 through 17, including cases, statutes, and secondary materials. Let's use a case as an example. Here, the site is to the case Widmore v. Linus, and it's just a regular case site. But all that we do is add a comma, available at in italics, and the URL to provide a parallel citation to the same content on the internet. Lastly, some material originates on the internet and cannot be cited to a printed source. Rule 18.2.2 and B10 handle this type of source. If it's an online article, you should cite to it in the same way that you would cite to a print article, but with the URL information given at the end. Here's an example. This web article follows the same format as a print article. The only change is that after the date parenthetical, there is a comma instead of a period, and the URL where the article can be found. Rule 18 deals with other types of non-print sources too. If you need to cite to a video recording, Rule 18.6 will walk you through it. If it's an audio recording, look to Rule 18.7.